Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another conversation with Ameriguayas. I'm Delicia, and
Soy Mary Baisha pa.
Baisha
um,
pa.
we are here today to talk about a few things that have been on our minds. So we're gonna just kind of tell it how it is, how we've been processing the representation of Paraguay, and so we're here to again discuss our opinions on everything that we discuss is our experience. And so take everything with a grain of salt. You may agree with it, you may not, but we're going to talk about it regardless.
Exactly. And it's coming at the heels of the forest fires in Asunción, in Departamento Central, Cauteura, and grassroots organizing activism and representation of Paraguay in popular culture media in the US and abroad in the global context. So we've just been discussing and processing a lot of things from our lived experiences being US born daughters of Paraguayan immigrants. So, like Mary said, we're coming from that context and those lens, and from our own lived experiences and how we feel about certain things, and want to kind of critically analyze and critically talk about certain things as we navigate what's happening in real time in popular culture as it relates to Paraguayan representation. So we started Ameriguayas with that in mind, to bridge this gap between US culture and Paraguayan culture and deconstruct what's happening from our lived experiences. So, like Mary said, take what we say with a grain of salt because it's from our lived experiences. If you feel that you have a different thought or a different opinion or something, please share with us. We want to grow, we want to learn, and we want to hear various diverse conversations as part of this ongoing discussion.
Yes. So, like Delicia said, part of one of one of the main discussions that we've had is representation or underrepresentation of Paraguay. And we've done an episode already on pop culture media, but today we're going to discuss a little bit about more so how news is either not not projected here in the US, and or it's very little is known about current events that are happening in Paraguay. So one of the most recent were the fire outbursts in Paraguay. And first, I want to say that our small growing community means so much to us because it truly shows a solidarity in being Paraguaya. And even though, we are here in the United States or Canada or wherever you're from, it shows that we are united. And that's really important. And you guys are helping us grow. And so with the events of the fires occurring in Paraguay, there was very little known about it here in the US. I think The Guardian was one of the only news journalist sites that reported it. I think CNN Español did like one little thing on it, one little article on it, but there's not much exposure. So, when Australia fires happened, and currently the fires in California, there's a lot of noise. So that's why Delicia and I decided to make some noise when it came to the events, similar events affecting us globally when it came to Paraguay. So we will talk more about that and that process as we are organizing with the people in Paraguay. So shifting back to media, again, we said we're going to focus more so on like the news channels, how they kind of lack representation of Paraguay and who they choose to represent Paraguay when they have the opportunity. So that brings us to the topic of the day, which is Delicia.
Yes. So we're talking about going back to what Mary said really quickly with the representation in pop culture. Like the US has a lot of media companies that their goal is to diffuse and talk about Latin America and Central America, like Remezcla, Me Too, We All Grow Latina, Latitude, Latina Made, Not Made, like all these different little pockets of social media accounts. And none of them spoke about the fires in Paraguay. And their main purpose is to grow representation of Central and South American countries. And no one mentioned it. So that's one huge issue, because if their main goal is to talk about representation, they did not even mention it. And the second ironic part is, like, we're still in Hispanic Heritage Month, or Country of Origin Appreciation Month, like Mary and I are talking about it in that way, or have renamed it for us to reconnect to it better. And we have a whole episode about that, so check that out if you haven't listened to it, and why we kind of identify more with Country of Origin Appreciation Month versus Hispanic Heritage Month. But besides the nuanced logistical wording, we're still celebrating this month in the US, and this tragedy is happening in Paraguay, which is a Spanish speaking country, and the US holds a lot of immigrants and firstborn US citizens of Paraguayan descent here. So that's super ironic that we're still in this month, and none of those people talked about this. No post, no story, nothing. Or even individual like influencers who have larger platforms that are in the media discussing huge issues happening, right? They're posting about California fires, which is important because that's affecting farmers that are mainly Hispanic and Latino. Great, we have to talk about that. And other issues happening with immigration, with the elections coming up, we have to talk about that. But this is also happening in the heart of South America, which, if this expands to Brazil and Argentina, that's where the Amazon is. That's where the heartbeat of the world is, and climate change is very real. So I think now that we're a week away from doing our organizing efforts of collecting money for immediate need and support, we're taking a step back and realizing that no one really showed up with great platform when they had a huge opportunity to do so. And if they're gonna keep saying that they're influencing to gain representation of Central and South America, and they didn't do it in this way, I think it's their actions don't align with what they're saying. So another reason why Mary and I wanted to start Ameriguayas, so we can be that representation for Paraguay. And I'm super excited we have that momentum and that the grassroots organizing, but we also need support. So I think that's what we're processing out loud through this conversation. And then how does that trickle to other influencers and travel organizers who go to South and Central America to take pictures in these beautiful countries, but when something happens like a fire, do they show up for that country again? I don't know. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah, so like Delicia said, there's a lot of influencers on social media specifically, and they have a huge platform. And, you know, when you have a huge platform like that, we kind of expect more accountability, right? You are in front of a lot of different viewers. And so the expectation is honestly higher, or that's my opinion.
Yeah.
So we have discussed this, and we feel like we need to hold those accounts accountable, or those influencers or those pages, whatever it may be, accountable. And so today we're actually going to talk about, I'm sure many of you guys know him. He is very popular, I would say. He has a huge following, and his name, or what he goes by, is El Chad. So bear with us and stay with us in this conversation. So we are going to discuss some of the issues and problems that we see with this specific influencing account, travel account, him as a personnel, that he's trying to amplify the voices of Latino countries, specifically Paraguay. So we are going to talk about El Chat today.
Yeah, and I think in a context, like a macro level context as to where he operates is this week, right? He was invited to talk in Telemundo. I'm not sure about what specifically, but it was during still the fires of Paraguay. So in my mind, Telemundo is a Hispanic or Latino focused company. And so my question that I had was, why did they invite a US born, non-blood related to Paraguay to discuss Latin America, Central America? He does cool things. I'm not going to take that away from him from traveling, but in this opportunity to highlight the fires and the things happening, there are a lot of US born descendants of Paraguay who could show up and discuss our community in a different light from our perspective. So I think it's also holding Telemundo, Univision, NBC, ABC, all these big media companies accountable to do their research and find authentic people to discuss Central and South American culture, right? There's a huge nuance and issue with inviting a white person to talk about South American countries. And we're going to talk a little bit about terms and a little bit about academic stuff. You know, I like my academic terms.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And expand a little bit about the framework of understanding, because that's how we're learning. That's how we're processing as well. Because at face value, it looks great that someone is going to a country and like representing us and like showing our country. But we have to be careful with how that happens with travel voyeurism and cultural voyeurism. We'll discuss these terms in a little bit, but just to give you an idea of where we're heading in this conversation. So stay with us.
Yeah.
And like I said, at face value, it looks really cool, but what is underneath that? What is happening? What is operating as a power dynamic? In one of our first videos, I talked about intersectionality and Kimberly Crenshaw's work and how different systems of privilege and oppression operate daily. So in travel, this happens, right? So that's kind of the background and why we're talking about this, because we noticed that all of this happened within like a week span, right? Popular culture media not talking about Paraguay when they have an opportunity to, but then also larger media companies having an opportunity to highlight in-country people. Like they could have talked to Mayeli Villalba, they're activists on the ground who are dealing with this day to day, and they chose a white man to talk about Central and South America. So this is us holding larger media companies also accountable.
Right. Yeah. So like Delicia said, when it comes on the surface, it's great. I mean, when El Chat first started his blogging or his videos, I think it was maybe 3-4 years ago. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to go back on that. But I was like, oh, wow, cool. Someone's representing Paraguay. Like, this is great. And then once you take a look at his content, or as he was progressing his content, like something about it was off. It was rubbing me the wrong way. And so with this, and you know, this critique is not coming out of nowhere. It's not like we chose to just pinpoint him, and that's not what this is. It was the fact that, you know, there were things going on in Paraguay we felt like we needed to make noise about. And like I said, we're just holding these people accountable that can do that on a bigger platform. And so in some of the work that he does, there's some unpacking that we've done with how he is representing Paraguay, and we're going to mainly focus on Paraguay. So I know he travels to all the other countries as well and touches upon them, but specifically we'll talk about Paraguay, and then the issues of why that is problematic when it comes to bigger organizations like Telemundo, for example, where he recently did an interview, and he, I believe, discussed why Paraguay I think why Paraguay isn't represented as much, or he touched upon kind of like what we are talking about, like how Paraguay is often misrepresented, I think was the basis of his interview from what I saw, what he posted on his story. So that is kind of what we're unpacking today. And kind of his background is he is from the US. I believe he was born in Texas, and then he grew up, I think, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so he is a white male. And so just process that for a little bit. And then once you process that, and then realize that that is someone who Telemundo in this specific situation chose to represent Paraguay, that is the issue we are going to talk about.
Yeah, and I think within all of that travel that happens, like we said, at face value, it looks amazing that someone's going into our country and like showcasing it, but it's about the nuance of how it happens, right? So there's something called cultural voyeurism that not only happens in like the influencer travel industry and area, but it's also about service trips, right? I went to a Jesuit university, and we had a lot of service trips to go to quote unquote third world countries, which is also a problem. That's just like a made up term to discuss these countries that are in the southern cone of the Americas. So I'm gonna pull up here the exact definition, so it's not that I'm making this up, and we're also gonna link the article to the show notes so you can read it for yourself. Let's see, where are they? Okay, here we go. So like I said, this is not only happening in the travel industry as to what he is engaging in, but this happens with service trips and other influencers who go to Paraguay or Brazil or Argentina. This isn't, we're focusing on Paraguay because that's, the motherland. But this happens worldwide. This happens in Africa too. So really quickly, cultural voyeurism is the practice of seeking some kind of gratification by objectifying a culture different from one's own. So this happens while traveling, and from my research, so this is the person who wrote the article, and from my research in West Africa to my teaching in New Zealand, I've encountered many instances of such objectification, particularly relating to tourism. So unfortunately, even the best intentions can be problematic. So what we need to do is recognize cultural voyeurism and instead engage in actual emancipatory action. So in short, culture voyeurism is objectification that is something dynamic and changing, like culture. It is turned into an object, a thing, and the cultures themselves have little control over this process. So colonial white supremacist imaginations frame such problematic objectification. Consequently, this limits how much people of color can determine if, let alone how white people objectify them. So this is a power dynamic, right? When a white individual or white identifying person goes into a South or Central American country and thus wants to engage in the culture but take something out of it as part of this process of objectification, it becomes a problem. It becomes a colonial white supremacist doing, right? So that, how does that show up? That shows up in taking pictures with kids on the streets, with taking pictures with the indigenous in the community, taking picture with Black and brown bodies in Africa, right? Because rarely the person going in, like I said, is white identifying and holds the power in this dynamic. So the question then becomes, do these people ask for consent to take pictures with them? Number two, if they do ask for consent, are they giving consent to then distribute it? how and where. Like, is it going to be on a website? Do they get written consent or verbal consent? So that becomes part of it. And then lastly, the article continues and says, it is also the consumption of objectified cultural practices and symbols. And typically there's little to no benefit to those of the other culture, right? So in service trips or influencer traveling, the person goes into these countries, takes pictures, engages in the cultural dances, which are very sacred. The indigenous Maca Guaraníes have very sacred dances. And if they are invited, if a white tourist is invited to that community to engage in that, then are they holding those dances actually sacred in the indigenous community? So I'm not going to say someone is or isn't, but that's the question that we come across when we're critically analyzing and see people travel in this way. Like we said, at face value, oh my God, amazing, they're showcasing our culture. But what is deeply in that is this colonial white supremacist way of consuming and objectifying the other culture, right? It's this otherness, and that's what makes it like this exotic other, right? These are the exotic individuals I'm going to see. Or we were talking about like a comment like, oh, they're actually so nice, or they're actually really welcoming. And that's rooted in deep colonial understanding that maybe the other or Black and brown bodies are savage.
Right.
So that's where we're coming from when we're having these conversations.
Yeah, so I know that was a lot to process what Delicia just said and read. So specifically to El Chad and kind of unpacking what Delicia said and kind of comparing it to what he's doing is, for example, he has a YouTube video out there remixing to a rap song about tereré. And that's just one part of our culture that, yes, and maybe he is appreciating tereré and the culture, but it's there's something wrong about that, and that's the undertone of the colonial white supremacist view, patriarchy view of why they go and what is their intention. We're not saying that his intention was, you know, bad. He's not going in there for that reason. Obviously not. He loves the culture. He's talking about it, but it's in the manner that he does it. And then a lot of his videos as well, he chooses when to really act on his Spanish and really perform his Spanish as if he really knows Spanish really well. And then he switches to almost in, this is how, you know, we've taken it, we've taken it per our discussions, is it's kind of almost mocking when he is speaking Spanish in his American, gringo, country, Pittsburgh spin on his Spanish. And it's like, which one is it? And it almost comes off as mocking. So some of his videos are in that, I guess, context, comes off as appropriating the culture of Paraguay specifically. And he's running around Mercado Cuatro, is it, Delicia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where the Mangiru or...
Yeah, and just, again, like taking videos with these in-country people. And so what is the purpose of that? Besides, you know, creating this video to upload to your channel. So that's kind of what we're unpacking and what Delicia was explaining in terms of the colonial overtones of this specific influencing idea or way or method that he's going about it.
Right. And it's like the cultural appropriation that is almost like a comedic undertone. And there's a space and time for comedy. Like, I'm not saying that comedy is not needed in the world, but if the intention is to showcase the culture, but it's done in a tropey cultural appropriation way, then that is kind of like in the US, when we see the images of like the monkey with the big lips and the circus, and how Blackness is showcased in the US as like a comedic way, and appropriating that culture. And now that we're like heading towards Halloween, like appropriating like Native American culture with headdress and blackface. And so those are the kind of things that we're seeing show up, especially with the Terere song, because my first question was like the copyright of like the remix with A Bebe. Like, is that even a thing? Number two is this going around and just like doing it in a, like a comedic tropey way with other people. And like, is the person who is on the cover of the picture of the music video, he used like the campesino as a trope, and he might not have intentionally done it in this way, but looking back and deconstructing it and processing it, especially this week, a lot of things are showing up and just not adding up and making sense. And like, as an Ameriguaya, making me uncomfortable. So think about it from the context of our experiences too, right? So this is how we feel in our opinions. So my first question is, that campesino paid a fair wage, right? Talking about labor. Was he, did he give consent for that picture to be distributed? Is he gaining residual rights to that image that's on social media, right? I don't know, maybe there is a contract. I really don't know. But these are the questions that I ask as an activist, as a person who my work is diversity and inclusion. These are the first questions that I come up with. And it just, the cultural appropriation tropey, like comedic, like ha ha ha, like vamos a tomar tereré, vai chapar. I was gonna start speaking Portuguese. Let's speak in Guarani when it's funny, when it's fun. Like, that's offensive in many ways, because Guarani is a sacred language that comes from the indigenous communities that were killed and murdered during colonial times. So Mary and I reclaiming Guarani and Guarani word of the day is one thing, but making fun of it in that way is deeply problematic, because unfortunately his descendants are white colonizers. So there's an issue there, like that, like you
Right.
you can't just take language and a culture when you feel like it, and when you want to benefit and make money off of that, because that's exploitation and objectification when you feel like it, and not when you live day to day, when Maca, Guaraníes, and campesinos are being discriminated when they speak Guarani. Like,
And yeah, I just want to add also, majority of the indigenous Guaraníes, they live in El Chaco also. So they are deeply affected by current events right now with the fires going on. So, and again, just going back to him, he did post I think he shared a GoFundMe page in his story, and he like asked how he could help. And then that's about the extent of what he did. So we are using our space to kind of voice how we feel and how it makes us uncomfortable. Honestly, it rubs me the wrong way as an Ameriguaya, as living in that country. I didn't live there, but traveling in that country since I was little and understanding and growing up with that culture here. It's our time as Ameriguayas, Delicia and I, and all of you, to take back our culture and let it be us to showcase Paraguay. Give us that space, give us that opportunity. We're not asking to go on Telemundo or, to like these big organizations, but to support us. Yes, that is something that means something in terms of supporting people who are associated with that culture versus an outsider who is coming in and thinks it's cool and
Mm-hmm.
is gaining followers or gaining momentum because he thinks this country is cool and he doesn't understand, the history or anything like that. But so go support other Paraguayos who talk about and also represent Paraguay in that traveling space as well. There are so many traveler blogs who are Paraguayos. And so that's just, homework, I guess you could say, is supporting those who are actually in country and also doing that same work. And yeah, so that's what I have to say on that. Delicia, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, good thing you brought that up about the in-country influencers who are fighting for space in the digital world because of the geography of Paraguay, which is small, and the location of it, and how Central South America works in relation to North America and the US. There's so many great activists and influencers that Mary and I are trying to get in touch with, build relationships with, so we can also showcase who they are, because we're learning, thankfully, through social media and WhatsApp, we can really connect with them and set up a Zoom call or a WhatsApp video call and connect with them and then showcase who they are, as a way to build this community and bridge between the US and Paraguay in the most authentic way that we know how to do it, and in a delicate that's not appropriating Paraguay and the people that live there, and respecting the people who live there, because we grew up in the US, so we are also not immune to maybe some of these tendencies too. So we have to be careful with how we engage as well. So we also don't come off as exploitative or like objectifying not only Paraguayan culture, but while we go abroad. So I think we're also learning and we're navigating and we're trying to figure it out along the way. We just, I think with the fires in Paraguay and everything happening in current events this week, we just felt it was very important to have this discussion because we don't see anyone else having this discussion. And not to say that the behavior is what we're talking about and trying to unpack. And there was another thing. Oh, so this brings me to think about the international development industry and international like travel industry and service. What is it? What did I say before? The service trips. And how like it's part of white savior complex that we are going into a less than country with less resources to help them for a week with food and like taking pictures with them and like them showing their community, and then we bounce. It's like that actually does more harm than good. So it's actually thinking about how do we engage in structural changes to help these communities actually flourish, and also have a conversation around why are these countries so destabilized? How did the US and the UK and China have an influence to destabilize these countries that are rich in resources? So that's another conversation. However, I think it's important to understand, there's a really good article that we will link here that talks about this idea of white savior complex, that we are the knowers of knowledge and the knowers of how to industrialize this community and save them. They don't really need saving. They just need to be given space to build and grow the way they need to do it, because they've done it before colonialism, right?
Right.
Los indígenas and the native peoples of the land have been doing this well before colonialism. So thinking about all of that and unpacking it is part of why we started this endeavor. And if you have questions or thoughts or opinions, if we talked too fast or said something that you didn't understand, like a term that I use, please let us know. We want you to understand like what research we do before we talk about this, and also give you that information.
Yes. Or maybe we talk too much, but who knows? Hopefully you were still listening by the end of this. But yeah, we're using our Ameriguayas space as Ameriguayas to also unpack ourselves. Like Delicia said, we were born in the States, so it's also important for us to reflect and recognize and learn also where, you know, we can learn and grow as well. And so we're all doing this together, doing the work together. So let us know, like Delicia said, if you have anything to add to this discussion, any questions, and Delicia will link all the information she talked about today, all the big words she used. And so stay tuned for the next episode. We can't wait to discuss another topic with you guys.
Yes, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and see you in the next one.